What if I told you that the biggest threat to global football isn't Brazil, France, or Argentina? What if the country about to conquer the world is one that didn't even have a professional league 34 years ago? It completely upsets me when people look at Japan and treat them like a cute, wholesome underdog story. They see the fans cleaning up stadiums, they see the polite bows, and they think it is just a heartwarming sports narrative. But behind that polite smile lies the most cutthroat, relentless, and terrifying talent development program the world has ever seen. Right now, Japan has not lost a single match to a European nation in 8 long years. That is exactly 2,908 days of absolute dominance. Think about that. While the rest of the world treats their lack of a quarterfinal appearance as a sign of weakness, the smartest minds in football know the truth. It is not a failure, it is a warning. When Japan defeated Spain, Luis Enrique saw the writing on the wall. He tried to warn everyone by saying, "This is just the beginning." But what he should have said is that these results are just the tip of a massive, unstoppable iceberg. By now, almost everyone with an internet connection has seen those viral videos of Japanese youth academies on TikTok. Millions of people watch these kids performing hyper-complex, lightning-fast technical drills, and they treat it like a gimmick. They leave comments about how disciplined they are, completely blind to the reality that they are looking directly at the generation of kids that will soon defeat their own national teams. If you dig a little deeper, you realize something truly frightening. The specific academy trending in those viral videos isn't even an elite professional academy. It is a regular high school team, and not even a particularly successful one in Japan. Let that sink in. Japan is putting ordinary high school students through more intense, high-level technical training than what some top-tier European professional academies offer to their elite prospects. Most countries decide they want to become a football powerhouse and immediately look for a shortcut. They spend billions of dollars buying aging superstars, they hand their historic clubs over to private billionaires, and they completely ignore grassroots development. They build massive stadiums before even thinking about giving local kids a proper pitch to play on. Japan did the exact opposite. They practiced absolute patience. They sat down and devised a literal 100-year plan to transform their entire nation into a mechanical factory that never stops producing world-class talent. That is why every single new generation of Japanese players feels like a golden generation. They engineered it to be that way. And the wildest part of this story, when they first designed this blueprint back in the 90s, the end goal of winning the World Cup was set for the year 2092. But by the early 2000s, they were so incredibly ahead of schedule that they officially moved the deadline up to 2050. And today, as the Japanese Football Association talks more and more about their Vision 2030, it becomes crystal clear that they know they won't even have to wait that long. To truly understand how insane this journey is, you have to realize that just 34 years ago, professional football in Japan did not exist. There was absolutely nothing. Professional baseball had been dominating the country for over 70 years, effortlessly selling out the 65,000 seats of the Tokyo Dome. If you were a talented footballer in Japan, the absolute peak of your career was joining the Japan Soccer League, which was nothing more than an after-hours amateur league. You didn't represent a city, you represented whatever company you worked for. You worked a 9-to-5 job and trained under floodlights. Up until that point, only 2 players had ever managed to escape this system. The first was Yasuhiko Okudera. He practically had to sneak out of the country to train with FC Köln while on a national team tour in Germany. The entire concept of professional football sounded so absurd to the Japanese people that when Okudera told his company he was quitting to play in Europe, his managers literally promised to keep his old corporate position open for when he inevitably failed. Instead, he scored back-to-back goals to secure Köln their second ever Bundesliga title, and the very next year he was scoring in a Champions League semifinal against Nottingham Forest. Yet, even that historic success changed nothing at home. 3 years later, a young boy named Kazuyoshi Mayora, the man who is now the oldest active professional footballer on earth, decided he wanted to make it too. He was only 15 years old when he left Japan for Brazil completely alone. He had $700 in his pocket, did not know a single word of Portuguese, and did not even have the promise of a trial. That was the desperate, bleak reality of Japanese football. There was no culture, no infrastructure, and zero belief. But then came the first spark, and it didn't come from a billionaire investor or a famous coach. It came from a cartoon. 2 years after Miura left for Brazil, Brazil, Captain Tsubasa began broadcasting on national television. From the very first episode, the main character made a solemn promise. He would take Japan to the World Cup and win it. The show became an absolute phenomenon, in a beautiful twist of reality imitating fiction. Do you know what the creators named the fictional manager who gave Tsubasa his first call-up to the national team? Okudera. It was a direct homage to the one man who had proven the dream was possible before fiction even dared to write it. Within a single decade, that cartoon spark turned into a raging wildfire. Amateur matches started drawing massive crowds, businesses took notice, and a local steel manufacturer went as far as signing the Brazilian legend Zico. In 1993, the J-League was officially born with just 10 foundational clubs. They were decades behind their regional rivals. They were 10 years behind South Korea and 20 years behind Saudi Arabia. But Japan was not in a rush. They instantly established one core, unshakable principle. The only way to build a real football culture is to tie teams to their local communities. They completely banned corporate names. Every single club had to belong to its people. Instantly, crowds boomed from hundreds to tens of thousands. But the road was full of brutal heartbreaks. In their very first season, Japan missed out on World Cup qualification in the final seconds of the match due to a 90th minute equalizer by Iraq. This moment became deeply scarred into the national psyche as the Agony of Doha. It was devastating because Japan had just won their first ever Asian Cup and felt invincible. Caught up in the emotion and fueled by a booming economy, they made a massive mistake. They tried to copy the financial splurges of European leagues. They threw millions at aging superstars like Gary Lineker, Leonardo, Dunga, and Hristo Stoichkov. But just 5 years into the experiment, right as they won the rights to co-host the 2002 World Cup, the Japanese economic bubble burst. Sponsors pulled out overnight, and top-tier clubs faced immediate bankruptcy. This is the exact moment where any other country would have abandoned the project, but Japan realized they had simply underestimated the scale of the challenge. Instead of panicking, this was the exact moment their legendary 100-year plan was officially put into writing. The rules were simple but strict. By the league's 100th anniversary, they would have 100 professional clubs and a World Cup trophy. To protect the league from financial ruin, they enforced golden rules. Absolutely no overspending. Every single yen had to be reinvested into the community, into world-class infrastructure, into advanced coaching education, and youth academies were made strictly mandatory for club registration. The plan worked beautifully. By 1998, Japan qualified for their very first World Cup. Even though they lost all 3 group games, they fought like lions and introduced the world to Hidetoshi Nakata. With his bleached hair, blue gloves, and complete lack of fear, Nakata became an overnight sensation. By the end of that year, the Asian Beckham was playing in Serie A and earning a Ballon d'Or nomination. Nakata, who had fallen in love with the sport because of Captain Tsubasa, was living proof that the system was working. The very next year, Japan's under-20 team reached the World Cup final. The year after that, they won their second Asian Cup, and suddenly it was time to host the world in 2002. Japan did not just impress the world with their ultra-modern stadiums. They topped a group containing Belgium, Russia, and Tunisia before narrowly exiting in the round of 16 to Turkey. More importantly, that tournament made the domestic J-League incredibly cool. It triggered the biggest attendance boom in their history, and this time they had the infrastructure to sustain it. They hired Zico as the national team manager and went on to win the next Asian Cup by defeating their fierce rivals China right in the heart of Beijing. The momentum was so massive that ahead of the 2006 World Cup, the federation officially slashed their 100-year timeline, moving the ultimate deadline from 2092 to 2050. Of course, progress is never a straight line. The 2006 World Cup was a disaster. After leading Australia for 84 minutes, they conceded 3 quick goals, collapsed in the group stage, and a heartbroken Nakata retired from football at just 29 years old. But the ecosystem they built was now too strong to fail. While Shunsuke Nakamura was becoming a cult hero at Celtic with his legendary free kicks, domestic clubs like Urawa Red Diamonds and Gamba Osaka won back-to-back Asian Champions League titles. The federation kept pushing harder, establishing an elite national academy and expanding high-tech training centers to every single prefecture. Japan had achieved cruise velocity. They had built a self-sustaining football ecosystem that could survive any single disaster. By the 2010 World Cup, they famously defeated Denmark 3-1 and were a penalty shootout away from the quarterfinals. But they wanted more. They realized they had gone into that tournament with a manager who had 0 international experience and a squad where almost no one played in Europe. So the great European takeover began. began. Suddenly, Shinji Kagawa was winning back-to-back Bundesliga titles with Borussia Dortmund before moving to Manchester United to help Sir Alex Ferguson win his final Premier League trophy. By 2014, even though they suffered another group stage exit, Japan named a squad that featured 11 established European-based stars. Their growth was so exponential that in 2016, the Japanese Football Association introduced Project DNA. They took a massive $2 billion broadcasting deal with DAZN and used it to build a highly sophisticated data system. This system created individualized development blueprints for every single club in the country, and the federation declared that funding would be distributed strictly based on how successful a club was at developing elite young talent. They literally forced every domestic club to become a Wonderkid factory just to survive. And that brings us to the modern era, where things get truly cinematic. At the 2018 World Cup, the squad dynamic had completely flipped. Only 8 players in the entire team were playing domestically in Japan. They made history by becoming the first Asian nation to ever defeat a South American giant at a World Cup, beating Colombia in the opening match. Weeks later, they found themselves leading Belgium's legendary Golden Generation 2-0 in the round of 16. They were 30 minutes away from the greatest upset in football history. But then, the football gods turned cruel. Jan Vertonghen scored an absurd looping header, Marouane Fellaini equalized, and in the final seconds of stoppage time, Japan pushed everyone forward for a corner to win the game. Belgium launched a flawless, lightning-fast counterattack and scored the winner. The heartbreak was so profound that Japanese media created a feature-length documentary analyzing just those 14 seconds of the counterattack. The conclusion was undeniable. As technically perfect as Japan had become, they completely lacked a ruthless, cold-blooded striker. Their cultural obsession with teamwork, harmony, and passing had stopped them from breeding a selfish finisher who kills games. So just like they did 40 years prior, Japan turned to anime to solve a real-world national crisis. The very next month, the manga Blue Lock was created. The story follows a radical experiment designed specifically after that tragic defeat to Belgium, aiming to isolate and create the most selfish, deadly egoist striker in Japan. If you think it is absurd that an anime could influence real-world sports development, look at the facts. The Japanese Football Association officially partnered with the creators of Blue Lock to launch the Future Camp project, openly declaring to the public that they are searching for true egoists to win the World Cup. And that experiment brings us directly to where we are right now, in the summer of 2026. Fast forward to today, and the scale of the Japanese machine is absolutely mind-blowing. They now have 60 fully professional clubs in their country, which is more than France. They have 24 players active in Europe's top 5 leagues, and a staggering 62 players if you include the English Championship, the Belgian League, and the Dutch Eredivisie. Their talent pool has grown so exponentially that they entered this tournament in the middle of a catastrophic injury crisis, losing their 3 biggest global stars, shifting their lineup entirely. Yet, they look completely untouched. Aside from a veteran backup and a couple of domestic keepers, every single player on this roster plays for a major European club. They have Takefusa Kubo, the former Real Madrid prodigy and one of the most electric dribblers on earth. They have Ritsudon Kaishu Sano tearing up the Bundesliga, Hiroki Ito playing for Bayern Munich, and Takehiro Tomiyasu fresh from Arsenal. Between the posts stands Zeion Suzuki, a terrifying physical specimen who is a serious contender for the best young goalkeeper in the world, completely solving Japan's historical weakness in goal. And as for that missing striker position, the Blue Lock evolution is complete. Ayase Ueda just finished his European season as the absolute top scorer of the Eredivisie, scoring 8 more goals than any other player in the league. This incredible breakthrough has allowed the explosive Daisen Maeda to shift back to his absolute best position on the left wing, creating a devastating attacking front line. To put it simply, Japan's total market value has tripled since 2018 and nearly doubled since the last World Cup. No other Asian nation is even in the same stratosphere. They have just proven their level by defeating England, beating Brazil, and launching their current campaign with a dominant display against the Netherlands. They only need to reach the quarterfinals to secure the greatest World Cup run in their history. But looking at this terrifying self-sustaining machine, they are aiming for the entire crown. The 100-year plan is running decades ahead of schedule, and history will be made this summer.